Over this last year, several people have been not just convicted, but sentenced in connection to the Harvest Homecoming shooting.
18-year-old Bryce Gerlach was killed and 2 other innocent bystanders were hurt. Wave News reporter Logan Perone is live in New Albany as the first jury trial in this shooting is set to begin.
Jose and Myra, despite the long line outside the courtroom of potential jurors today, a jury has not been finalized. We learned that this trial is going forth after the defendant, Isaiah Page, rejected a plea deal. For the first time since gunshots upended Harvest Homecoming in October 2024, a man accused of killing 18-year-old Bryce Gerlach will face a jury trial. Isaiah Page is currently facing 6 charges, including murder. Judge Carrie Stiller, while reading the charges to some of the 200 potential jurors, said Page is alleged to have knowingly killed Gerlach during the shooting. The now 19-year-old was one of 5 people arrested in the weeks and months that followed.
Witnesses alleged they saw Isaiah Page draw a firearm from a backpack and began firing from the fountain area down toward the right area.
Court records show prosecutors offered Page a plea deal. Page rejected that deal early this year. Prosecutor Chris Lane declined to discuss what the deal entailed. 12 people in total have been sentenced in connection to the shooting.
We as a family believe that Joshua Smith should have received no less than what Bryce received, which would have been life in prison.
4 other defendants in this case have taken plea deals, and those individuals could be called to testify during Page's trial. Now on Monday, Judge Stiller denied Wave's request to have a camera in the newsroom for this trial. And today, I was in the auxiliary courtroom. I spoke with some of Isaiah Page's family. They declined to comment on the jury selection. We're live in New Albany tonight. Logan Perone, Wave News.